We're joined by a couple of folks here today. One, who from Talking Points memo, again, Zachary Roth, who's their senior reporter, and then Time Magazine contributor Andres Martinez. How do you interpret President Karzai here, Zach?
Well, the main way to interpret it seems to be that much of this is for domestic consumption. I think Karzai understands, people say, that he's a pretty weak leader of a pretty weak government, and he needs to appeal in some way to much of the Afghan population where parts of the Taliban and parts of that more extremist rhetoric are popular. And so, as you said, you can see him using those kind of words, invaders, creating a resistance force that seems a pretty direct way to appeal to those people. And that seems to be how the White House took it from their comments.
Andres, do you view it in that same fashion? Is this just another politician playing politics effectively? And do we have any reason to concern Karzai drifting towards an Iranian alliance, considering the drift of Iraq away from Iran in their most recent election?
Well, I agree with Zach that this is primarily a need on Karzai's part to bolster his street cred within Afghanistan by distancing himself from the U.S. At the same time that the U.S. administration is distancing itself from Karzai. I mean, Obama's made it very clear that we're stuck with President Karzai as an ally. But this isn't the old days where, you had an American president that pretended that every ally out there was the next Thomas Jefferson. To that extent, I think it's a pretty healthy dynamic, although it's good that Obama read him the Riot Act when he was in Kabul last week. And look, at the end of the day, Karzai is a pretty crafty but weak populist politician, and he needs to bolster his own street cred.
Although the ties with his brother to the heroin dealing probably helps with the weakness, maybe not politically, but I bet you they got a nice house in Dubai. Finally, the FAA is lifting a ban restricting pilots from taking antidepressants. The agency says potential side effects of these drugs, like drowsiness, in their opinion, do not pose a safety hazard. So starting Monday, the FAA is going to allow pilots to take antidepressants like Prozac, Celexa, and others, as long as the pilot has illustrated a history of using the drug for at least a year without any incidents. As many as 10,000 pilots could be affected by the changes. Does this give you any change of point of view on flying one way or the other, Zach?
It doesn't really change my point of view. It seems like one of the things that's happened is the drug makers have figured out how to make these drugs a little bit better so that there is less risk of drowsiness, and that's what the FAA has concluded. But it also, the bigger point seems to be that there's an acceptance that pilots have stressful jobs and even suffer from depression. And part of this is that they've encouraged pilots to say, okay, I've been taking these drugs to prevent depression. You can come forward, we can talk about it, we can get treatment. And that seems like a positive thing.
Andres?
I agree. It feels like a real cultural milestone. On the other hand, I'm glad that there's this rule that you have to have been treated for over a year, or for at least a year, because these drugs have gotten a lot better. But Zoloft, Prozac, there can be pretty dire side effects that aren't always known, and it's not just drowsiness. Yeah. It can make people suicidal. It can, but by and large, this is a reflection that there shouldn't be this stigma attached, and that for plenty of people who are already taking these drugs, including pilots, there ought to be more transparency. So I think it's a good step.
I agree with you guys. Listen, thanks for the visit on a Good Friday. Nice to see you. Still ahead here, Obama voters.